Do you really know the character of the people around you? Carl Jung discovered that it is not words, nor smiles, nor achievements that reveal who someone really is. All of this is part of the mask, the persona that each one builds to be accepted. But Jung noticed something disturbing. No matter how perfect this image is, it always breaks down at two specific points. Two simple, inevitable signs that escape without the person noticing. Imagine being in front of someone you trust. Suddenly, a minimal detail, an unexpected reaction, delivers a hidden truth. In that instant, you are no longer in front of the mask, you are in front of the true self. Jung said that the scariest thing is not to discover the shadow of the other, but to face our own. Because these two signs not only show who others are, but also reveal what we avoid seeing in ourselves. Get ready. Once you know these two windows of the soul, you will never see people or yourself in the same way again. The mask we all carry. From an early age, we learn that the world does not accept everything we really are. We create an image of ourselves that seems more beautiful, more acceptable, more adjusted to what others expect. This image is the mask that Jung called a persona. It's not something completely false, but it's a filter, a character we choose to wear to be loved, respected, or at least tolerated. Think about how many times you've held yourself back from saying what you really thought. How many times did he smile unwillingly? How many times did he say, "Everything is fine," when inside nothing was fine? This mask is not just a conscious choice. It becomes so natural that we begin to believe that we are that. Over time, we confuse the mask with our own identity. But what Jung discovered is that the mask is never perfect. No matter how hard one tries, there will always be fissures, small moments when the true self escapes. It is in these moments that the character appears, not when someone is prepared, trained, or in front of an audience, but when they are vulnerable, distracted, or pressured. It is important to understand that the mask is not just a lie. It is often necessary. If everyone showed their fears, anger, and insecurities in a raw way, life in society would be almost impossible. The mask organizes coexistence, but the problem arises when we believe only in it, when we start to live only to sustain this image. At this point, we lose touch with who we really are. Jung called this process of inner disconnection one of the greatest tragedies of the human psyche. Because the more we identify with the mask, the more distant we become from our own essence. We create an idealized version of ourselves that requires constant effort to maintain. And all this effort takes a toll. That is why, when someone faces a stressful situation, the mask breaks. And in this rupture, something arises that cannot be feigned. But before we get to that point, there's another crucial detail: the way we react to what we see in others. This was one of Jung's greatest finds. The mask may hide a lot, but our judgments reveal even more. They work as a reflection, a window that shows what is unresolved within us. And that's exactly where the first sign of true character begins. Notice how there is a natural transition. From the mask that everyone creates, we start to look at the reflection that arises when it meets the shadow. It is this passage that opens the way to the first great revealer of who we are, the first sign. The reflection of the shadow. Carl Jung said that what we reject most in others is usually precisely what we hide in ourselves. This phenomenon he called shadow projection. It is as if our mind, without realizing it, puts on the outside what we do not accept on the inside. Therefore, our judgments do not only speak about who we are criticizing, they talk a lot about ourselves. Imagine someone who gets exaggeratedly angry with people considered arrogant. It's possible that this person carries within himself a desire to impose himself, to value himself more, but he cannot admit it. So instead of accepting this aspect, she rejects it and starts to see it with anger in others. The intensity of the trial shows the strength of the internal conflict. This is the first sign of character, observing to whom and to what someone reacts most intensely. Because there is not just an opinion, there is a revelation. What the person rejects so strongly is precisely what is hidden inside him. But don't think that this is only true for negative aspects. We often also project positive qualities. When someone admires another person's courage or intelligence too much, they may be faced with gifts that they have not yet recognized in themselves. Shadow is not just darkness. It also hides talents, virtues, and potentials that have been repressed. That is why Jung said, "Until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it destiny." When we judge the other, we let slip clues about what we have not yet accepted in ourselves. This is the key to understanding the depth of the first signal. The most impressive thing is that no one can completely control this reflection. It doesn't matter how much someone pretends to be calm or mature. Just look at the intensity of his criticism, the way he talks about others, the details he insists on pointing out. It is at these points that his shadow appears. When we look at it from this angle, each judgment ceases to be just a criticism and becomes an involuntary confession. And that's exactly why this signal is so reliable. It works as a map of the soul, and here is the essential transition. If the first sign shows who we really are through judgments, the second sign appears when the mask can no longer hold up in the face of pressure. That is, when the carefully constructed image begins to break. And it is to this moment that Jung directs our attention, what the judgments really hide. If in the first sign we saw that judgments reveal much more about who judges than about who is judged, now we need to deepen this perception. Carl Jung called this the projection mechanism. The unconscious mind takes what we do not accept in ourselves and projects it onto the other as if it were its own. It is as if we put a mirror in front of the soul, but believe that the reflected image belongs to the external world. What does this mean in practice? It means that every time someone criticizes in an exaggerated way, they are missing a part of themselves. It is not just any opinion, but an intimate trait that has been hidden, repressed, or never acknowledged. And precisely because it is repressed, this trait bothers even more when it appears outside. For example, someone who endlessly criticizes the laziness of others may be struggling with their own difficulty in dealing with their moments of rest and productivity. Anger does not come only from what you see, but from what you feel in yourself and try to suffocate. Exaggerated criticism becomes a way to push away this inner truth. But judgments do not only reveal weaknesses, they also showcase hidden talents. When someone praises another person too much, putting them on a pedestal of perfection, they may be facing qualities that they have, but still do not accept or do not believe that they deserve to assume. This is the light side of the shadow. Jung taught that the shadow is not only made of defects, but also of virtues that we leave aside. What makes judgments so valuable for understanding character is precisely the fact that they are automatic. No one can control them completely. They appear in comments, in facial expressions, in small gestures. It is as if the unconscious opens windows through which what we try to hide escapes. Here's the bottom line. When we pay attention to what irritates or delights someone in an exaggerated way, we have access to a faithful portrait of what's hidden in their psyche. It is as if it were an invisible map. That is why Jung said that trials are like unsent letters that reveal secrets of the soul. Now notice the link with the next step. Judgments show what the person projects, what he hides from himself. But there is another, even more revealing moment, when the mask, that carefully constructed persona, cannot withstand the pressure and begins to break. That's where we come to the second great sign of true character. The second sign when the image breaks. If the first sign is in the judgments, the second appears in moments of tension. Carl Jung realized that maintaining a mask requires constant effort. The persona is like a tight outfit. It gives the shape we want to show, but it's not really comfortable. When we are relaxed, we can sustain it. But when we are pressured, criticized, or taken by surprise, that clothing begins to tear. It is at this moment that the true character is revealed. Because, under stress, no one can maintain performance for long. The mask slips, and what appears is the real self, with its insecurities, fears, and more authentic reactions. Think about simple, everyday situations. When someone is contradicted in public, when an unexpected error happens, when you receive direct criticism. At these times, you can observe if the person becomes aggressive, defensive, manipulative, or if, on the contrary, they can take a deep breath, reflect, and respond calmly. These reactions are not trained. They come straight from the psychological core of each one. Jung said that the way we react to discomfort is one of the greatest revelations of character. This is because no one can pretend eternally in the face of pain, criticism, or failure. What emerges at that moment is what was hidden. That is why he stated that the foundation of all mental illness is the refusal to accept legitimate suffering. Those who do not accept to deal with real pain end up creating defenses that denounce their fragility. The most interesting thing is that this breaking of the mask does not only happen in major crises. It can come up in small details. When someone is forced to wait longer than they would like, when they lose control over something banal, when they don't get the attention they expect. In these small failures of control, we see the essence that the mask tries to hide. This second sign is so powerful because it catches people off guard. It's like an automatic reflex. No one can rehearse how they will react to an unexpected criticism or an exposed error. The reaction comes out without filter, clearly showing what is behind the persona. And here is the transition that maintains the retention. If so far we have talked about judgments and about the disruption of the image, we need to take it a step further. Because it is not enough just to observe what others reveal. It's necessary to understand how these reactions, when analyzed together, build an even more complete picture. This leads us to look at reactions as deep signals of the soul, and that's the way to the next subtitle, the reactions that reveal the soul. So far, we have seen that intense judgments show hidden parts of ourselves, and that the mask inevitably breaks in moments of pressure. But what really connects these 2 points is the reaction. The reaction is like a snapshot of the unconscious. It appears before the person has even had time to think, plan, or disguise. Carl Jung believed that the way we react to the unexpected is a direct window to the soul. Think about it. Someone can prepare a speech, rehearse gestures, smile in a studied way. But when something goes off script, it is impossible to sustain the staging. It is precisely at this moment that the true self emerges. Notice how this happens in banal situations. A person expects to be praised and instead receives a critique. In seconds, his tone of voice changes, his eyes reveal irritation, his body closes. Another example. Someone prepares to tell a joke, but no one laughs. The artificial smile disappears and pure discomfort arises. These simple moments are like lanterns that illuminate what was hidden in the shadow. The reaction is revealing because it is automatic. The conscious, responsible for controlling the mask, does not have time to act. The unconscious responds with its old patterns, its wounds, and its insecurities. That's why Jung said that authenticity is not what we show in a calculated way, but what escapes when we can't control it. Reactions also show a person's level of integration. When someone has accepted their weaknesses, their flaws, and their pains, they react more calmly, even under pressure. This serenity does not come from pretense, but from self-knowledge. The person does not have to defend himself all the time, because he has already reconciled with parties that he previously rejected. On the other hand, when someone has not accepted these inner parts, the reactions tend to be defensive or aggressive. Criticism becomes an offense, doubt becomes an attack, error becomes shame. The intensity of the reaction is proportional to what the person has not yet been able to integrate into himself. This is where we enter a fundamental key of Jungian psychology. It is not enough to just observe the reaction of others. It is also necessary to observe our own. How many times have you found yourself responding harshly, only to realize later that the situation didn't justify it so much? This is the unconscious speaking louder than the ego. Notice how there is a clear continuity from judgment to the breaking of the mask, and from the breaking of the mask to the reaction. And precisely in this line of connection, we arrive at the next step. If the reactions reveal so much, what happens when the mirror of the other gives us back what we have hidden? This is where the so-called occult test comes in, and it can show not only who we are, but whether we are ready to grow. The hidden test of the interior mirror. Jung said that it is not enough to identify the signs of the shadow or to notice when the mask falls. The real challenge lies in facing the inner mirror, the moment when what we criticize in others is reflected back to us. This is the occult test, the point at which character is revealed even more clearly. Imagine someone who lives judging others as arrogant. At some point, someone may ask, have you ever thought that maybe this arrogance you see so much out there has something to do with you too? The answer to this question is more revealing than months of observation, because it shows if the person is able to recognize their own shadows, or if they will continue to be stuck in defense. This test doesn't have to be straightforward. Often, life is in charge of putting before us situations that mirror what we criticize the most. Those who condemn lying can find themselves in a moment of omission. Those who point out the selfishness of others may find themselves acting with indifference. The mirror of life is relentless. What makes this test so powerful is that it not only shows the current character, but also the potential for growth. People who react with denial and anger to the mirror tend to remain stuck in old patterns. Those who can recognize a little of themselves in the reflection show openness to evolve. Jung stated that we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making darkness conscious. The mirror test is exactly that, the opportunity to see the darkness we project onto others and bring it into us as something that needs to be accepted. This process is painful because it requires humility. Nobody likes to admit that what they criticize the most also lives in them. But it is precisely at this point that maturity is built. The inner mirror forces us to face our own shadow without excuses, without masks, without illusions. And here's the bridge to the next step. When we understand that reactions reveal the soul and that the inner mirror is inevitable, we realize something even deeper. There is a moment when the unconscious speaks louder than the ego, and that moment is impossible to control. That will be the key to the next subtitle, when the unconscious speaks louder than the ego. By now we have understood that judgments reveal the shadow, that the mask inevitably breaks under pressure, that reactions show the level of integration, and that the inner mirror confronts us with our own truth. But Jung went even deeper. He showed that no matter how much the ego tries to control the narrative, there is always a moment when the unconscious speaks louder. The ego is that part of us that constructs explanations, that organizes the defenses, that tries to sustain the image. He says, I am like this, I act in such a way, I think in this way. But the unconscious does not ask permission. It expresses itself in lapses, in dreams, in small gestures, in words spoken without thinking. And mainly, it manifests itself at times when psychic energy is more intense. It is at this point that Jung said that no one can hide their true character forever. The unconscious escapes. He appears in a look of envy when someone succeeds, in a nervous laugh when something hurtful is mentioned, in a sudden change of tone of voice when the person is contradicted. The detail seems small, but that's where the revelation lies. The unconscious speaks louder when the ego is tired, distracted, or in shock. That's why so many times someone is surprised by saying, I don't know why I reacted that way, it wasn't me. But it was, yes. It was the deep self, the one that does not pass through the filter of the mask. This is the most uncomfortable moment because it exposes who we really are. And precisely because it is uncomfortable, it is also transformative. Jung said that the unconscious is not an enemy, but an ally that shows what the ego cannot see. When the unconscious speaks louder, we have the chance to get to know aspects of ourselves that were hidden. And if we have the courage, we can integrate them. And here the central question arises: what do we do after noticing these signs? What is the point of recognizing judgments, reactions, and lapses if we do not use this knowledge to grow? That is why the next step is so essential, the path of integration. Because, for Jung, true character is not only in revealing the shadow, but in transforming it into light. The path of integration and true authenticity. Carl Jung believed that the ultimate goal of psychic life is individuation, to become whole, reconciling the mask with the deep self, the ego with the unconscious, the light with the shadow. This process is neither simple nor quick. It requires courage to look inside and accept what we often spend our lives trying to hide. Integration begins the moment we stop denying. When we recognize that our judgments speak more about us than about others, we take the first step. When we admit that the mask falls and that our reactions reveal truths, we become more human. When we face the inner mirror and accept that what we criticize also lives in us, we are finally ready to grow. Authenticity does not mean perfection. It means consistency between what we show and what we feel, between what we say and what we think, between what we project and what we accept. Authentic people don't need a rigid mask because they've already reconciled themselves to their shadows. They do not deny their defects, but learn to deal with them. That is the true character, not an impeccable image, but a coherence between the inside and the outside. Jung said that life not lived is a disease of the soul. To deny parts of oneself is to live only halfway. To integrate the shadow is to live fully. In the end, these two signs that Jung revealed, the intense judgments and the breaking of the mask, are not just for understanding others. They are invitations to understand ourselves. Because when we realize what we criticize, what irritates us, what makes us react, we have before us a map for our own transformation. That's the most powerful point. Jungian psychology is not just a tool for deciphering others, but a journey for deciphering oneself. The more we accept our shadows, the more authentic we become. And the more authentic we are, the less we need to hide, the less we need to judge, the less we need to react with violence. Thus, true character is not only what others see in us, but what we can see in ourselves without running away. This is the key to individuation, to become whole, not perfect, but true. And in the end, Jung's greatest gift is this: when we learn to see the masks falling, when we understand judgments as reflections, when we accept the unconscious speaking louder, we discover that we no longer need to fear the shadow, because it stops being an enemy and becomes part of the path. That's true authenticity, living without fear of being who you are. We have reached the end of this journey through the eyes of Carl Jung, and perhaps the greatest revelation he has brought us is this: true character is never in what someone chooses to show. It reveals itself in what escapes, in what is projected onto others, in what arises when the mask cannot withstand the pressure, in what appears in spontaneous reactions, in what the unconscious lets overflow without asking permission. The two signs Jung highlighted, intense judgments and persona breakdown, are not just tools for deciphering others. They are mirrors for each one of us to recognize ourselves. Because, deep down, we all wear masks, we all cast shadows, we all have moments when we react in an uncontrolled way. And that doesn't make us less human, but more human. The challenge is what we do after seeing these signs. Do we run away from them, reinforcing the mask even more? Or do we accept the discomfort, recognizing that there is an invitation to grow there? Jung said that the most frightening thing is to accept yourself completely. That's the real courage, to look inside and not look away. Recognize not only our virtues, but also our flaws, our fears, our contradictions. If you want to really understand someone's character, look at these two keys. But most of all, use them to understand yourself. Because when we learn to see our own shadows, we start to live with more lightness, more authenticity, and more truth. And perhaps this is the greatest gift of this reflection, to realize that we do not need to be perfect, but whole. We need not be immaculate, but true, and it is exactly in this authenticity that life gains meaning.